Hello, everyone. Welcome to this first speos webinar on electronic invoicing. If you are concerned about the subject, you've come to the right place. As you certainly know, Belgium is about to launch B2B invoicing for all the companies established in Belgium, and it generates, of course, a lot of questions. To speak about the subject, I have the big pleasure to introduce the speaker of the day. His name is Philippe Gelin, and he's e-Invoicing Product Manager at speos. Hello, Philippe.
Good afternoon, Sabine. I am delighted to welcome you to this first speos webinar dedicated to invoicing. Firstly, because so many of you did register to the event, and secondly, because this is a very hot topic in Belgium and in the European Union. So during this webinar, we will review the main principle to do invoicing, what is invoicing, and how to perform compliant invoicing today. We will discover the upcoming landscape in Belgium and in the European Union. We will also discuss about a new initiative coming from the European Commission, which is VAT in Digital Age, because it impacts your organization. We will review what's going on in Belgium, probably the most important for you, and how speos can help you to be compliant with this evolving landscape. So briefly, what is the invoicing? So invoicing refers for speos to the digitalization of the invoice to cash or invoice to pay process between a supplier and a buyer. So the idea, of course, is to get rid of paper invoice. And in this context, this is very important to be compliant with relevant legislation. But the ultimate goal of e-invoicing is really to automate the process from the ERP system of the supplier till the ERP system of the buyer. So everything should be handled automatically. And in this context, this is quite important to be able to do electronic data interchange. This is new capacity that speos has developed recently. Obviously, we need also to take into account the new tax platform which are coming up, requesting some connectivity with your environment. So what are the benefits of the e-invoicing? Obviously, this is cost reduction. So many studies highlighted the fact that at least you can reduce your cost and to not pay the stamp. But I mean, it's much more than that. E-invoicing means faster payment because you have one digital document which is exchanged between the parties. It is much more easy for the buyer to approve the document in an electronic manner, to enrich the document and to import it in its back office system. It means for the supplier that he will collect his cash quickly, and this is quite important to improve the DSO. It will also come with increased accuracy because no human being is involved in the e-invoicing process. There is less error. And if there are less error, it improves the relationship between supplier and buyer because everything is transparent. You can see the status of the invoice, and so there is less dispute and better relationship. Also for the buyer, there is one opportunity to do an automatic reconciliation between the digital invoice, the digital purchase order, and the digital good receipt. So everything is matching. There is no need to involve a human, and the invoice can be imported automatically in the ERP system. Obviously, this approach is eco-friendly, so you will improve your CO2 footprint, and this is quite important those days, of course. So why invoicing is so important? I think it is important to understand that the value-added tax represents for a government between 20% of 50% of the revenue of one government. So this is a lot of money. And in 2020, the EU Commission has figured out the fact that probably there is 93 billion euro, which is not collected in EU. For Belgium, it represents 4.8 billion. So that's a lot of money. And obviously, government are thinking about putting in place some method to be informed to collect automatically the VAT information which are in the invoice issued by supplier. So before getting into the subject, how to perform today compliant e-invoicing. So there is a legal framework, which is the EU Directive 2010/45, sorry for that. But the main principle is to ensure the data integrity, authenticity of the origin. So it means that you must be able to know who is the organization issuing the invoice. The readability is also very important and one obligation, and a mutual agreement from supplier and buyer. So a supplier cannot send an invoice to the buyer if an electronic invoice, if there is no consent from the buyer. So the question we have quite often, if I send a PDF by email, is it a compliant invoice? It isn't unless it is signed. So there is different method mentioned by this directive. A qualified signature using a qualified digital certificate issued by a qualified certification authority. You can also perform a compliant invoicing method using the EDI, but it should follow some recommendation coming from the EU Commission. And the last but not least, this is the business process. So if you have strong business process, well documented, and you can justify the content of one invoice with any other document like a purchase order or a good receipt, you can perform compliant invoicing, but this is not the most easy approach, obviously. So this approach is commonly referred as the post-audit approach. Why? Because in fact, this is after the issuance of the invoice during one external audit that you can see whether the main principles are respected or not. So this legal framework is in place, but in 2020, Italy has put in place a mandatory e-invoicing system. So for that, Italy has requested a derogation to EU, because if you put in place an obligation to do electronic invoice, you don't ask the consent anymore of the buyer. So this is the reason why you need a derogation. And Italy put in place this system, which aims to capture every invoice issued by the supplier in real time. And many other member states are adopting today the same approach. So this approach is commonly referred as the continuous transaction control approach, because the idea is to make the invoice a transaction and every transaction to be captured by the tax administration. So what is a CTC platform? We can summarize this being a central platform managed by tax authorities to collect VAT-related data included in the B2B invoice in real time or near real time. So if you look at Italy, for instance, a supplier needs to issue one invoice in one XML format, send it to the tax administration platform, which are going to clear the invoice. So just make sure that the syntax and the semantic of the invoice is correct and confirm it to the supplier. And then the receiver, the buyer, will have the possibility to capture the invoice from the tax platform using a portal or using one API or a paper interface. And so to capture the invoice and put it in its ERP system. What is important to understand is that the legal and original invoice is really the XML file issued by the sender in the format expected by the tax administration platform. If we look what's going on in other member states, so today we have Italy and Hungary, which are live with this kind of system, this kind of CTC platform. We have France, Poland, and Spain who express their intention and their wish to put in place such platform by July 2024. And recently, Germany expressed the fact that they are going to implement such platform by January 2025. In parallel, we have many other countries like Finland, like Belgium, like Portugal, like Sweden, who express also their will to go for this kind of approach. And regarding Belgium, we will come back to that in the next minutes. Obviously, it will be too easy that we will have a situation where every member state will have the same approach. So unfortunately, those tax administration platforms may have different design. So for instance, in Hungary, this is a real-time invoice. As soon as the supplier sends the invoice to the receiver, he has the obligation to send immediately a real-time reporting, a real-time invoice to the tax administration. For Italy, this is a little bit different, but we are not going to go into details. What is important to understand is that every member state has a different approach, but the idea is to capture the invoice data in real time. If you want more explanation, I would advise you to read the ESPA publication, the European E-Invoicing Service Provider Association. There is a very good document describing the different models which are existing today. So let's review what is the upcoming invoicing landscape. So somewhere the advent of the continuous transaction control platform, and one very important component, the PEPL network and standard. But before going into the detail, let's have a short poll. Is your organization connected to PEPL? So we give you 30 seconds just to answer yes, no, or I don't know. It seems that the majority is no. So yes, so the majority is no or I don't know. Only 32% are already connected to PEPL. So it's worth spending some time to go into more details about PEPL. So PEPL is one very important component in this upcoming landscape. We can say that PEPL is really the de facto B2G network today. So B2G, this is invoice from private organization to governmental organization. So PEPL finds its origin in Directive 2014-55. It mentioned that all European public authorities must receive electronic invoice that comply with a certain standard, which is the European standards, or a data semantic model with a specific name, which is the EN 16931 data semantic model. So this data semantic model is not a syntax, this is not a file format, but it describes the mandatory field that should appear in one invoice and the relation between those fields and what are the possible values for those fields. This directive came into force in April 2019 for all the EU member states, and it has been transposed in the Belgium law in April 2019. So what is PEPL? PEPL stands for Pan-European Public Procurement Online. This is a strange name, but in fact, it has been designed for procurement process. It is likely that it will have a new name because it's not only procurement anymore, but also procure to pay or order to cash. PEPL was developed in Norway in 2012, at the same time that the Directive 2014-55. It was heavily promoted by EU and by EU member states in the context of this directive. But the beauties of PEPL is the fact that it is compliant to this directive, the B2G directive, and it is compliant with the data semantic model. So the idea is very easy. If you use PEPL for your B2G flows, you are compliant, and that's really the beauty of PEPL. So what is PEPL? PEPL is a non-profit, Open PEPL is a non-profit organization. It defines some business interoperability specification. So this is just a standard format for many business documents like order, good receipt, like e-catalog, but obviously also for invoice. And it relies on the cross-industry invoice, which has been developed by the CEN and ISO, the European and International Organization for Standardization. So this is really good foundation. And also the beauty of PEPL is the fact that this is a network also of accredited access points. So PayPal doesn't belong to anyone. An access point can be implemented by a private organization or by a service provider like speos. And you just have to sign a multilateral agreement. So no need to sign an agreement with every access point, just one agreement. And this agreement is organizing the way that those access points are running. So PayPal is designed on a four-corner model. So the sender has to send to the access point a PayPal-based billing file format. The access point is going to identify what is the access point of the receiver automatically. It will transmit the PayPal-based billing file to this access point. And the access point of the receiver will have the responsibility to deliver the invoice to the receiver. Obviously, when those access points are managed by service provider like speos, it is easy for us to capture the invoice data in any format and to translate it into the PayPal-based 3 billing format for invoice. Let's review now what is the VAT in Digital Age initiative. So basically, this is an initiative to facilitate the adoption of the CTC model in Europe. And let's review how it impacts your organization. So VIDA stands for VAT in Digital Age. It has been published end of last year by the European Commission. This is still in review phase, and as soon as it is in final phase, it must be adopted by the EU member states. The VIDA reforms cover 3 major areas: some e-invoicing obligation and some digital reporting requirement. It introduced some new rules, new VAT rules for digital platform. And also it introduced one single way to register, to have a VAT number in Europe, instead of having every member state having its own registration process. But let's focus on the e-invoicing obligation, which are the most important in the context of this webinar. So the VIDA initiative defined as from January 24, a new e-invoice definition. So it defined what is an electronic invoice. And an electronic invoice in this context is a structured file which is issued by the supplier, sent to the buyer, and the buyer should be able to process this file automatically and to import it automatically in its ERP system. So it is clearly not a PDF file sent by email. This is not compliant to the new definition. VIDA also introduced the fact that there is no need to ask consent anymore to the buyer. So if you are a supplier, as from January 24, if you want to send an electronic invoice to a buyer, you send it and the buyer need to accept it. Obviously, VIDA is still in review phase, so maybe this planning will change, but that's the idea. So a supplier should perform electronic invoice without the consent of a buyer anymore. Also, very important statement in the VIDA proposal is the fact that for a member state, there is no need anymore to request a derogation to impose a B2B invoicing in the country. The second step, which is for January 28, this is the fact that the new invoice definition will be the exclusive format for intra-community transaction. So it won't be possible between a supplier established in one country, a buyer established in another country, to use another format than the new invoice definition. And for domestic transactions, so transaction between the supplier established in one country to a buyer established in the same country, the new invoice definition will be the default format. It will be possible only to use paper for specific transaction, but only if the member state has requested a derogation for paper. So electronic invoice will be the default format for domestic transaction. Another step also will be to abolish summary invoice. So some company like telecom provider used to send an invoice at the end of the month with for multiple services. It won't be possible anymore. The idea of VIDA is to get rid of this. And probably this is a challenge for a telecom company or energy company. and it is likely that it can be adapted for the final version of VIDA. And last but not least, VIDA will introduce some invoice content requirement. For instance, the bank details will be mandatory in the electronic invoice. So what's going on in Belgium today? So regarding the B2G invoice, so invoice sent by private organization to public authorities, all invoice with an amount above 30k euro must be sent in an electronic manner today in Belgium, whatever it is for the federal state or the region. And those invoices must be submitted via the Mercurius platform. This is the federal platform to capture electronic invoice. So as a supplier, you can use a portal or you can use some existing API or interface. And one very important interface of this Mercurius platform, this is the PayPal network. So if you issue your invoice and send it to PayPal, it will be, the public authorities will be accessible via this channel. The last milestone in Belgium is November 2023. So this year, all invoice, including invoice below 30K, will be mandatory in Belgium with some very specific exception, but every electronic invoice, or every invoice in Belgium by the end of the year should be sent electronically to public authorities. Regarding B2B invoice, so invoice sent from private organization to another private organization, there is a planning existing today in a draft law currently prepared by the Ministry of Finance. So this is not a final version, this is a draft law, which is discussed during the tax reform in Belgium today. But it mentioned a planning which is quite interesting. As from July 2024, all Belgian company having a VAT number and with a turnover above 9 million should have the obligation, will have the obligation to send electronic invoice. As from January 2025, it will be company with a turnover above 700K. And in July 2025, all companies in Belgium which have a VAT number should have the obligation to send electronic invoice. So there is different. This is really a planning. I'm not sure that it will be possible to do that, and most of the analysts today believe that this is too difficult to respect this, to put this planning in place, and I believe that this is the case. What is important also to understand is that several times the Belgian finance minister expressed the fact that PayPal will play a very important role in Belgium today. And this is somewhere in good news because PayPal is heavily used today in Belgium by private company. So it means that PayPal is becoming the de facto network for B2G flow, but also B2B flow. And last but not least, the Belgian finance minister confirmed his support to the VIDA initiative, and this is a very good news. How speos can help you to comply with this evolving landscape? Well, that's very easy, in fact. Speos can deliver any document to any business partner in any format. It could be a custom format or it could be a standard format. We can use any secure communication protocol, and any delivery type is possible, whatever it is, a portal by email, certified email, SMS, or electronic data interchange, in addition, of course, of the paper invoice. So if we try to summarize, we just expect from your company to receive invoice data in your format. We will capture this invoice data, we will generate the legal and original invoice, we will archive it, this is an option, and it will be available through a portal. And then we will have the possibility, and we have the possibility to convert this invoice data into any format, expected by the receiver. And obviously, we can deliver this invoice in the expected format via many delivery channels. It could be a direct communication. So in this case, we will have a direct connection with your buyer. It could be through the EDI service provider of your buyer. So whatever your trading partner is connected to another company, we have in place today many interoperability agreements with the major EDI service provider, and it is very easy for us to set up a new interoperability with a new partner. Obviously, it is easy for us to generate an invoice in one PayPal BIS3 billing format and to send it to the access point of the receiver. And we can also send the invoice to the tax administration platform, like in Italy, in the format expected by the tax administration platform in such a way that the buyer can collect the invoice on this platform. A very important tool within speos, this is a track and trace. So the track and trace is a kind of database which captures every event from the moment we receive the invoice data from your organization until it is delivered to the buyer. And recently we put in place some business analytic tools. So every invoice that is issued from your ERP system can feed a business analytic data warehouse, and you can develop some indicators to monitor your business. A new service that we have developed with the e-invoicing solution, this is the self-onboarding tools. So your trading partner using this service is able to go to a web page and to decide which format and which communication protocol he would like to use to receive the invoice and which format he would like to receive the invoice. And of course, he will have the possibility also to provide his consent until the B2B invoice is mandatory in Belgium, of course. So capturing the consent and choosing the format. So your trading partner, for instance, could say, I would like to receive my invoice using the PayPal standard and using the PayPal network, and I provide you with my consent. Another service that we have developed, this is the compliance watch services. So basically, if you are interested to receive updates about the new legislation, the new regulation in Belgium and in the European Union, we can provide this to you. This is based on the subscription-based services. Just tell us in which country you operate, and we will send you all updates regarding e-invoicing. So why speos? In fact, speos can be today your one-stop shop for all delivery channels. So obviously, our business today, or so far, is to deliver document by paper. But today we are also able to deliver document and more specifically invoice in an electronic manner using a portal or EDI. We can provide you services, or at least services to your trading partner, to move from paper to electronic and provide their consent. And last but not least, if there is a problem in the electronic delivery, we can put in place an automatic fallback in such a way that the invoice would be delivered by paper or another delivery channel, electronic delivery channel like a portal, for instance, instead of PayPal. Obviously, our solution are compliance solution. We ensure compliance from the moment the invoice is issued until it is delivered to the buyer. And the invoice are by default archived in our archiving solution for the retention period required by the law. We have the interoperability services, any format, any communication protocol, and we can communicate with any business partner, any EDI service provider. And as I mentioned initially, we are connected to many tax administration platforms today, so Italy, India, Turkey, and we commit to connect to all tax administration platform, to all CTC platform that will come in the future, so France, Poland, and Spain. So the conclusion, that's very easy. start your transformation today and adopt PayPal as your B2G and B2B standard. So claim to the world that your default format for electronic invoice, this is PayPal. It will solve all your problem. And also start to be ready for this VAT in digital age initiative and the new Belgium e-invoicing obligation. But really the best recommendation, the best advice that speos can give you is go to PayPal and adopt PayPal. Okay, it's time to conclude. Thank you very much for your time. It was very exciting to share those information with you today, and we would be glad to continue after this recording, of course. Thank you very much for your time and hope to talk to you soon. Bye-bye.